Lucas stood by the window of his small, modest apartment, gazing out at the gray city skyline. The streets below buzzed with the familiar sounds of life in a working-class neighborhood: car horns, distant chatter, and the hum of passing traffic. But inside their tiny apartment, the air was heavy with the weight of worry. His mother was working late again, doing everything she could to make ends meet. She worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices during the day and waitressing at night. Yet it never seemed to be enough. The bills piled up, and now with his grandmother's health rapidly declining, it felt as if they were drowning. Lucas's grandmother had always been the heart of their family, the one who kept them going when life was toughest. But now she was the one who needed help. She lay in her bed in the next room, her once strong frame now frail and weakened by illness. The doctors had said she needed surgery, an operation that could save her life. But the cost was astronomical. There was no way his mother could afford it, not with her meager earnings. Lucas felt helpless, but he couldn't bear the thought of losing his grandmother. He had to do something. He turned away from the window and walked to his grandmother's bedside. Her eyes fluttered open when she sensed his presence, and despite her obvious pain, she gave him a soft, warm smile. "Lucas," she whispered, her voice raspy but filled with love. "You look worried." He knelt beside her, taking her frail hand in his. "I'm fine, Grandma. You just rest, okay? We're going to figure this out." But the truth was, Lucas had no idea how they would come up with the money for her surgery. His mother had tried everything, applying for loans, asking family members for help, but it wasn't enough. They were running out of time. That night, Lucas lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. His mind raced, trying to come up with a solution. And then, as he scrolled mindlessly through his phone, he saw a flyer for a local talent competition. The grand prize was a substantial sum, enough to cover the cost of his grandmother's surgery. He stared at the flyer, his heart pounding. Lucas had always loved to sing, but it was a passion he had kept to himself. He would sing quietly to his grandmother as she rested or hummed softly while doing his homework. But he had never performed in front of anyone, not even his friends. The thought of standing on a stage in front of a crowd terrified him. But what terrified him more was losing his grandmother. Singing was his secret talent, and now it might be the only thing that could save her. The next morning, Lucas sat at the kitchen table, staring at the flyer. He could hear his mother bustling around, getting ready for work, and his grandmother's soft coughing from the other room. His heart clenched with determination. He had no choice. He had to do this. Later that day, Lucas walked into his grandmother's room and sat beside her bed. She was sleeping peacefully, her breathing slow but steady. He looked at her for a long time, memories of his childhood flooding his mind. How she had always been there for him. How she had sacrificed so much to take care of him and his mother. Now it was his turn to take care of her. "I'm going to do this for you, Grandma," he whispered. "I'm going to win that competition, and we're going to get you the surgery you need." I promise. Lucas made his way to the talent competition's registration booth later that afternoon. His hands trembled as he signed his name, feeling the full weight of what he was about to do. His stomach churned with anxiety, but there was no turning back now. He had made a vow to himself, and more importantly, to his grandmother. He would win, no matter what. For the next few days, Lucas practiced whenever he could, singing quietly in his room, humming softly while walking home from school. Every time he sang, he pictured his grandmother smiling and healthy again. Her strength returned. He knew he had to pour all his love and emotion into his performance. It wasn't just a song for him. It was his only chance to save her. The night before the competition, Lucas sat by his grandmother's bedside again. She was awake, her eyes tired but full of warmth. "You look like you have something on your mind," she said gently. Lucas hesitated, then finally confessed. "I entered a talent competition, Grandma. The prize money, it's enough to pay for your surgery." Her eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, Lucas, I never knew you sang." He smiled shyly. "I've always loved singing, but I've never done it in front of anyone. But I have to try, for you." Tears welled in her eyes as she squeezed his hand weakly. "You don't have to do this for me, sweetheart. I don't want you to feel like you have to carry this burden." Lucas shook his head, his voice firm. "You've done everything for me, Grandma. This is something I want to do. I'm going to win this. I promise." As his grandmother drifted back to sleep, Lucas felt the weight of his vow settle over him. Tomorrow he would stand on that stage and give everything he had. His heart beat with a mixture of fear and determination. But one thing was certain: he wouldn't let his grandmother down. Tomorrow would be the beginning of something far bigger than he ever imagined. The day of the competition arrived, and Lucas could feel the tension building inside him from the moment he woke up. The sun had barely risen, but his heart was already racing. Today wasn't just about standing in front of an audience. It wasn't about the prize money or the competition. Today was about his grandmother. It was about keeping his promise. Lucas got dressed in his simple clothes. He didn't have anything fancy to wear like the other contestants might have. He looked at himself in the mirror and took a deep breath. His reflection stared back, wide-eyed and anxious. His stomach churned and his hands trembled. The weight of what was at stake felt overwhelming, but he couldn't let fear take over. He had to remember why he was doing this. He glanced at the clock. It was time to leave. As he stepped out of his room, he saw his mother sitting at the kitchen table, her face weary from exhaustion. She had worked late again the night before, barely getting any sleep. She offered him a tired but encouraging smile. "Are you ready, Lucas?" she asked gently. Lucas nodded, though his heart felt like it might leap out of his chest. "I'm ready." His mother stood up and walked over to him, pulling him into a hug. "No matter what happens today, I'm so proud of you, and so is Grandma." Hearing those words gave Lucas the strength he needed. He hugged his mother back tightly, then turned and headed out the door, his heart pounding in rhythm with each step. The walk to the competition venue felt like a blur. The city streets bustled with life as usual, but Lucas was lost in his own thoughts. He imagined the faces of the audience, the judges, the blinding lights of the stage. He could already feel their eyes on him, waiting for him to prove himself. Doubt began to creep in. What if he wasn't good enough? What if he froze up in front of everyone? But then, in his mind, he saw his grandmother lying in her bed, her frail body worn down by illness. He remembered the nights he would sing softly to her, how her face would light up even when she was in pain. Lucas clenched his fists and pushed the doubt away. He had to do this. He would do this. By the time he arrived at the venue, the competition had already begun. The building was packed with people, contestants, families, and curious onlookers who had come to see the talent on display. The air buzzed with excitement and nervous energy. Lucas made his way backstage, feeling the tension in his body tighten with every step. As he waited for his turn, he could hear the muffled sound of music from the stage. Other contestants were singing, their voices echoing through the walls. Some were incredible, hitting every note perfectly, while others faltered under the pressure. Lucas felt the pressure mounting. His palms were sweaty and his throat felt tight. Could he really do this? Could his voice, something he had kept hidden for so long, really be enough? Finally, his name was called. "Lucas Garcia, you're up." His heart pounded in his chest as he walked towards the stage. The lights were bright, almost blinding, as he stepped into their glare. The auditorium was enormous, filled with hundreds of faces staring up at him expectantly. The judges sat at the front, their expressions unreadable, waiting to see what he had to offer. Lucas's legs felt like they might give out under him as he took his place in front of the microphone. The silence in the room was deafening. He could hear his own heartbeat thudding in his ears. His throat felt tight, and his mind raced with doubt. What if his voice cracked? What if he forgot the lyrics? But then in the corner of his eye, he saw his mother sitting in the audience, and next to her, an empty seat, the seat meant for his grandmother. It was a stark reminder of why he was there. He wasn't just singing for himself. He was singing for his family, for the woman who had always believed in him, who had always given him everything, even when she had nothing. Lucas closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and gripped the microphone tightly. He let all the fear, all the doubt, melt away. He let his heart take over. The music started. At first, his voice was soft, shaky. The words tumbled out, filled with nerves. But then he remembered his promise, and the weight of that promise gave him strength. His voice grew stronger, more confident. Each note carried with it the love he felt for his grandmother, the desperation he felt to save her. As the chorus came, Lucas's voice soared. The emotion behind every word poured out of him like a flood. His heart was laid bare for the entire audience to see. This wasn't just a song, it was his life, his love, his fight to hold on to the one person who had always been there for him. The audience sat in stunned silence, captivated by the raw emotion of his performance. His voice echoed through the auditorium, filling every corner, every empty space. There was no doubt in that moment. Lucas was special. His talent, his passion, and his love radiated from the stage like a beacon. As the final note faded into the silence, Lucas opened his eyes, his chest heaving with emotion. For a moment, there was nothing but stillness. The crowd was frozen, caught up in the intensity of what they had just witnessed. And then the applause began. It started with a few claps, but quickly grew into a thunderous ovation. The crowd rose to their feet, cheering and clapping for the boy who had just poured his heart and soul into his song. The judges exchanged glances, clearly moved by his performance. Lucas stood on the stage, his body trembling from the adrenaline. He had done it. He had faced his fears and he had given everything he had. And as he looked out at the crowd, he saw his mother, tears streaming down her face, clapping with all her might. In that moment, Lucas knew he had won. Not just the competition, but the chance to keep his promise, the chance to save his grandmother. Tears welled up in his eyes as he took a deep bow, overwhelmed by the love and support pouring in from the audience. He had never felt anything like it before. The crowd, the judges, his mother, they all believed in him. And for the first time in his life, Lucas believed in himself too. The night of the talent competition changed everything for Lucas. When the applause finally died down and the lights dimmed, he felt like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. For the first time in a long while, there was hope. He had won the competition, and the prize money would be enough to cover his grandmother's surgery. The relief that washed over him was overwhelming. But what Lucas didn't know was that his story, his voice, and his emotional performance had already begun spreading beyond the walls of the auditorium. By the time he got home that night, videos of his performance had already started circulating online. Clips of him singing, his raw emotion laid bare for all to see, had gone viral. Strangers across the internet were sharing the video, captivated by the powerful story of a boy who sang to save his grandmother. In the days that followed, Lucas's life changed in ways he could never have imagined. The morning after the competition, he was awoken by the sound of his phone buzzing nonstop. Confused, he groggily picked it up, only to see dozens of messages from friends, acquaintances, and even people he hadn't spoken to in years. They all said the same thing. "You're famous." His social media accounts, once quiet and almost empty, were suddenly flooded with followers, likes, and comments. News outlets began covering his story. Teen wins talent competition to save grandmother, the boy with the golden voice, and the viral sensation who sang his heart out. The headlines came fast and furious, and soon, Lucas's name was on everyone's lips. Before long, record labels started calling, each one offering him opportunities he had only dreamed of. Contracts, album deals, interviews. His once simple life was now filled with possibilities. But in the whirlwind of fame and attention, Lucas stayed grounded. Despite the offers pouring in, his first priority remained his grandmother. The day of her surgery arrived, and Lucas waited anxiously in the hospital alongside his mother. The prize money from the competition had been enough to cover all the costs, but that didn't stop him from worrying. His grandmother had been the rock in his life, and the thought of losing her was unbearable. He could still remember the nights she'd lull him to sleep with old songs from her youth, her voice soft and soothing, no matter how tired she was. Hours seemed to crawl by in the hospital waiting room, but finally, the doctor emerged with a smile on his face. The surgery had been a success. Tears of relief filled Lucas's eyes as he embraced his mother. His grandmother was going to be okay. He had kept his promise. That moment was more valuable to him than any amount of fame or fortune. But Lucas's journey didn't stop there. With his grandmother recovering and the media attention growing, Lucas found himself at a crossroads. He had tasted success, and now the world was offering him more. Record deals, appearances on television shows, collaborations with famous artists. All of it was within his reach. Still, amid the chaos, Lucas never forgot where he came from. The image of his grandmother in her hospital bed stayed with him, reminding him of why he had started singing in the first place. He had sung to save her life, but now he realized that there were so many others who were in the same position his family had been in, struggling to afford life-saving medical treatments, desperate for a miracle. Using his newfound fame and fortune, Lucas made a decision that would define his career. Rather than focus solely on his personal success, he chose to dedicate a portion of his earnings to helping others. He created a foundation that funded surgeries and medical treatments for families in need. Hospitals that once turned patients away due to financial limitations were now able to provide care thanks to Lucas's contributions. And it wasn't just about the money. Lucas became personally involved. He would visit hospitals, spending time with patients and their families, offering them comfort and hope. He would tell them his own story, how he had been in their shoes not long ago, and how love, determination, and faith had carried him through. His foundation helped fund surgeries for people from all walks of life, giving them the chance to receive the care they desperately needed. At the same time, Lucas's singing career soared. He released his first album, and it became an instant hit. His songs were filled with emotion, the same raw passion that had captured hearts during the competition. Fans from all over the world were drawn to his music, not just because of his voice, but because of the heart behind it. His performances were never just about the notes or the melodies. They were about the message. He sang about love, sacrifice, and the strength it takes to overcome hardship. Every time he stepped on stage, he remembered his grandmother and the promise he had made to her. Lucas's fame only continued to grow, but no matter how big he became, he remained humble. He still lived with his mother and grandmother, who had fully recovered and was thriving thanks to the surgery. He didn't buy a mansion or flashy cars. He stayed true to his roots, always remembering the struggles that had shaped him. He used his platform to raise awareness about healthcare inequalities and continued to pour his resources into his foundation, ensuring that others wouldn't have to face the same obstacles his family had. His mother, who had sacrificed so much to raise him, also became a focus of his efforts. After his grandmother's surgery, Lucas ensured that his mother received the medical care she needed. Years of hard work had taken a toll on her body, and she had ignored her own health for far too long. But now, with Lucas's support, she was able to take care of herself. She no longer had to work 2 jobs or worry about how they would make ends meet. Her son had become a success, and more importantly, he had become a man with a heart full of compassion and love. As Lucas's career progressed, his story inspired countless others. He became a symbol of hope, proof that no matter how dire the circumstances, it was possible to rise above them. His foundation expanded, and soon it wasn't just providing medical care. It was funding research, supporting healthcare workers, and offering scholarships to young people pursuing careers in medicine. Lucas had started out as a boy singing to save his grandmother, but now he had become a force for change. His voice wasn't just a gift. It was a tool he used to make the world a better place. And as his grandmother often reminded him, his success wasn't measured by the number of albums he sold or the fame he achieved. It was measured by the lives he touched along the way. Through it all, Lucas remained grateful. Every time he stepped on stage, every time he received an award or a standing ovation, he thought back to the night of the competition, the night that had changed everything. He had made a promise to his grandmother, and in keeping that promise, he had found his true purpose. His story wasn't just about success or fame. It was about love, family, and the power of using one's gifts to help others. As Lucas's fame continued to rise, so did the weight of his responsibility. Fame, as he had quickly learned, was both a blessing and a challenge. With every sold-out concert and chart-topping hit, there was a new pressure, a new expectation to keep the momentum going. But through all of it, Lucas never lost sight of why he had started singing in the first place. His grandmother's surgery had been the spark, but now his mission had expanded far beyond that. He had become a beacon of hope for people all over the world, people who were struggling, just like he had been. In the months following his rise to stardom, Lucas founded the Harmony of Hope Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to funding life-saving surgeries for those who couldn't afford them. Drawing from his own experiences, Lucas knew how terrifying it was to face a medical crisis without the financial means to cover it. His foundation quickly became a symbol of light in the darkest of times, offering support to families who had nowhere else to turn. The hospitals he partnered with were overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Lucas didn't just donate money. He visited the hospitals, sitting by the bedsides of patients, speaking with doctors, and listening to the stories of those who had been given a second chance. These hospitals became sanctuaries for the sick and suffering, and because of Lucas, they were now places where hope thrived. During one of his visits, Lucas met a young girl named Mia, who reminded him so much of himself. She was only 10 years old, but her body was frail, battling a rare illness that had ravaged her for years. Her parents had exhausted every possible option, and her prognosis had been bleak. But now, because of Lucas's foundation, Mia was scheduled for a surgery that could save her life. When Lucas walked into her room, she greeted him with wide, curious eyes and a shy smile. "I've heard your songs," she whispered, her voice weak but filled with awe. "They make me feel brave." Lucas knelt by her bed, taking her tiny hand in his. "You are brave, Mia. Braver than I ever was." That night, Lucas couldn't stop thinking about Mia. She was just one of the many children who had been helped by his foundation, but she represented so much more. She was the reason he had started this journey in the first place. Lucas realized that while his voice had brought him fame, it was also giving others the strength to keep fighting. His next concert was dedicated to Mia and all the children like her. As he stepped onto the stage, the weight of his mission pressed down on him. But it wasn't a burden, it was a privilege. Thousands of fans filled the stadium, the lights flashing in time with the music, the crowd roaring with excitement. But as Lucas looked out into the sea of faces, he saw more than just adoring fans. He saw hope. The music began, and as Lucas sang, the words took on new meaning. His songs weren't just about love or loss. They were about perseverance, about never giving up, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Each note was a reminder to the world that even in the darkest of moments, there was always a glimmer of light. His voice had become a weapon against despair, a reminder that no matter how tough things got, there was always hope on the horizon. The concert was a massive success, and by the end of the night, Lucas had raised enough money to fund surgeries for dozens of families in need. But more than that, the concert had reignited something in Lucas, a deeper understanding of his purpose. Fame wasn't the goal. Making a difference was. Over the next year, the Harmony of Hope Foundation expanded, reaching countries across the globe. Lucas's music became intertwined with his charitable work, and his fans embraced his cause with open hearts. His concerts were not just performances. They were calls to action. Each time he took the stage, he spoke about the importance of helping others, of using whatever gifts or resources you had to make the world a better place. The foundation began to collaborate with hospitals to not only fund surgeries, but also to provide long-term support for families who were struggling. Lucas's influence grew beyond the music industry. He was invited to speak at global health conferences, and his name became synonymous with hope. The boy who had once been terrified to sing in front of a crowd was now standing on stages in front of world leaders, sharing his story and advocating for those who couldn't afford health care. But despite all the accolades and attention, Lucas remained humble. He still lived in the same modest house with his mother and grandmother, who had both fully recovered thanks to the surgeries his singing had funded. Fame had not changed him. It had only amplified his desire to help others. One evening, after a long day of meetings with his foundation's board, Lucas received a letter. It was from Mia's parents. With trembling hands, he opened it, bracing himself for whatever news it held. As he read, tears welled in his eyes. The surgery had been a success. Mia was now in remission and recovering at home. The letter was filled with gratitude. But what touched Lucas the most was a drawing Mia had included, a crayon picture of herself standing on a stage, microphone in hand, just like him. At the bottom, in shaky handwriting, she had written, "Thank you for giving me hope." Lucas stared at the drawing for a long time, the tears streaming down his face. It was moments like this that made everything worth it. He had once sung to save his grandmother, and now his voice was saving others. His foundation wasn't just about money or medical bills. It was about giving people like Mia a second chance at life. As Lucas's career continued to flourish, he never lost sight of what truly mattered. He released more albums, performed at sold-out venues, and even won prestigious awards. But through it all, his heart remained focused on helping others. His songs, once filled with his own dreams and fears, now carried a message of hope for anyone who listened. He had learned that true success wasn't about the number of records sold or the size of the audience. It was about the lives you touched, the hearts you lifted, and the hope you spread. And as Lucas's voice continued to echo across the world, he knew that no matter how high he climbed, his foundation, his mission, would always be his greatest achievement. In the end, Lucas was more than just a singer. He was a voice of hope, a reminder to the world that kindness, love, and compassion could change everything. His foundation continued to grow, his music continued to inspire, and his heart, filled with the love of his grandmother, mother, and all those he had helped, remained his greatest gift to the world. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the story and share any themes or ideas you'd like to hear in future stories. Your feedback means the world to me. Thanks for watching.